Shalom everyone, and welcome back to the Sequential Midrash Aggadah series, where we are walking through the Kleinman edition of Midrash Rabbah, chapter by chapter, uncovering the layers of wisdom that the ancient sages embedded in every verse of the Torah. Today we arrive at the chapter 3 of Bereishis Rabbah. And this chapter is extraordinary because it deals with what might be the single most powerful moment in all of creation. The moment when God spoke those three words, "Let there be light," and reality itself was flooded with radiance. Now, the verse we are working with spans Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 through 5. And it reads, "God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated between the light and the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day." That is our canvas, and the sages are going to unpack every single phrase of this passage with teachings that will genuinely shift how you understand the nature of light, darkness, good, evil, and the very architecture of creation. So let's begin. The chapter opens with section 1, and the Midrash connects our verse to a passage from Psalms. Rabbi Yitzchak opens by citing Psalms chapter 119, verse 130. Which says, "The opening of your words illuminates, making simpletons understand." And from this verse, the Midrash derives that God's very first utterance in the act of creation was, "Let there be light." Light was the inaugural word, the first thing God chose to bring into existence through speech was not heaven, not earth, but light. Now, this leads directly into a famous dispute. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah disagree on the sequence. Rabbi Yehuda says that light was created before anything else. His parable is beautiful. He compares it to a king who wishes to build a palace, but the site for the palace is dark. So what does the king do? He lights lamps and lanterns first, so he can see where to lay the foundations. Similarly, God created the light first so that the creation of the actual world could commence. Rabbi Nehemiah takes the opposite view. He says, the world was created first. His reasoning is that God did not need the light to create. Heaven and earth came first, and then light was brought in afterward. The Midrash then shows how multiple sages line up behind these positions. Rabbi Pinhas, Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon, Rabbi Kanin, and in the name of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, all came and expounded the same Psalms verse. And their shared conclusion supports the idea that "Let there be light" was indeed God's first utterance affecting creation. Now, section 2 moves to a verse from Psalms chapter 33, verse 6. By the word of Hashem, the heavens were made. Rabbi Bereishis, in the name of Rabbi Yehudah bar Shimon, teaches from this verse that God did not create with toil, exertion, or physical effort. Rather, by the mere word of Hashem, the heavens were made. The moment God spoke, reality obeyed. There was no gap between the divine utterance and its manifestation. This is a foundational principle. God's speech is not like human speech. When we speak, our words describe reality. When God speaks, His words create reality. The word itself is the act. The utterance is the deed. Now, we're moving on to section 3, brings in a verse from Proverbs chapter 15, verse 23. A man has joy through the utterance of his mouth, and how good is a thing in its time. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai expounds this as referring to God Himself. The man spoken of here is the Holy One, blessed is He. And the verse is teaching that God rejoiced in His first utterance, which was, "Let there be light." And the second half of the verse, "How good is a thing in its time," refers directly to what follows in our passage. God saw that the light was good. So creation was not a cold, mechanical process. There was joy in it. God delighted in the emergence of light. He looked at it and saw goodness in it. Now we arrive at one of the most mystical passages in this entire chapter. Section 4 records an exchange between Rabbi Shimon ben Yehozadak and Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Rabbi Shimon asks, "I have heard about you that you are a master of Aggadah. So I am asking you directly, out of what was the light created?" And here is what happens. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman replies to him in a whisper. He whispers the answer. He says, "The Holy One, blessed is He, wrapped Himself in a garment, as it were, and caused His splendor to brighten the world from one end to the other." Now, why did he whisper? Because this teaching touches on the account of creation, which is traditionally transmitted discreetly. The idea that God wrapped Himself in light like a garment comes from Psalms 104, verse 2, covering with light as with a garment. This suggests that the primordial light was not some external substance. It emanated from God's own radiance. God cloaked Himself in light, and that act of self-revelation is what illuminated existence. Then Rabbi Bereishis, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, adds another layer. He says, the light was created from the side of the Holy Temple. He cites Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 2. "And behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east, and the earth shone from his glory. The place from which God's glory radiates into the world is the temple. So the original source of the primordial light is connected to the most sacred point on earth. Section 5 gives us a stunning structural teaching. Rabbi Simon points out that the word light is written 5 times in our passage. And he says these 5 mentions correspond to the 5 books of the Torah. God said, "Let there be light," corresponds to Genesis, the book in which God engaged in the creation of his world. The phrase, "and there was light," corresponds to Exodus, the book in which Israel went forth from darkness to light, from servitude to freedom. God saw that the light was good corresponds to Leviticus, which is filled with many laws that illuminate a person's eyes. And God separated between the light and the darkness corresponds to Numbers, which separates between those who departed from Egypt and those who would enter the land. And God called the light day corresponds to Deuteronomy, which is filled with many laws. What the Midrash is showing us here is that light is not just a physical phenomenon. Light is Torah. Each book of the Torah is a different frequency of that original divine light, refracted into the world through different forms of revelation. Section 6 asks a deceptively simple question. The verse says, God called the light day. But are light and day not the same thing? Why does the verse treat them as if they are different? The sages answer with one of the most famous teachings in all of rabbinic literature. The light created on the first day of creation is not the light of the sun. The sun was not created until the 4th day. This primordial light was something else entirely. It was a spiritual, transcendent light, so powerful that if it shone alongside the sun, it would render the sun superfluous. So where is this light now? It has been hidden away, concealed for the righteous in the world to come. As the prophet Isaiah declares, the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be 7-fold like the light of the 7 days of creation. The Midrash then adds a beautiful ethical observation. Rabbi Elazar teaches that God never designates his name upon evil, only upon good. Notice that the verse says, God called the light day. God's name is associated with the light. But when it comes to the darkness, the verse simply says, the darkness he called night, without mentioning God's name directly. Rabbi Yohanan and Reish Lakish illustrate this with a parable. It is like a king who had 2 generals, and the 2 of them were quarreling. Each one wanted to rule by day, so the king summoned the first one and said, "The daytime shall be your domain." And he summoned the second and said, The nighttime shall be your domain. God assigned light and darkness their respective roles, their respective territories, and in doing so, He established the very structure of time. Now, moving on to section 7, contains perhaps the most daring teaching in this chapter. The Midrash notes a grammatical subtlety. The verse says, "And there was evening," but it does not say, "Let there be evening." Evening is not commanded into existence the way light is. The sages derive from this that a system of time had already existed for 2,000 years prior to the 6 days of creation. And then Rabbi Abahu makes his famous declaration. Before creating the present world, God was creating worlds and destroying them. He would create a world, look at it, and destroy it. Create another, destroy it, again and again. Until finally, He created this world and said, "This one pleases me. Those earlier worlds did not please me." This is an astonishing teaching. The sages are telling us that our world is not God's first attempt. It is the culmination of a process. God refined creation through iteration until He arrived at a world that expressed His will. And the key distinction, according to the commentaries, is that this world was the one that would accept the Torah. The previous worlds could not sustain the balance of free will and divine law. This one could. And that is why it endures. Section 8 takes a completely different approach to the same verses. Rabbi Yanai teaches that from the very beginning of the world's creation, God foresaw the deeds of the righteous and the deeds of the wicked. And the Midrash maps every phrase in our passage onto this cosmic foresight. The earth was tohu. This is an allusion to the deeds of the wicked. God said, "Let there be light." This is an allusion to the deeds of the righteous. God separated between the light and the darkness. He separated between the deeds of the righteous and the deeds of the wicked. And there was evening. These are the deeds of the wicked. And there was morning. These are the deeds of the righteous. And then the Midrash arrives at a remarkable conclusion. The verse says, "one day." Why one day? Because God gave them one special day. And what day is this? It is Yom Kippur, the one day in the year when the Holy One, blessed is He, gives both the righteous and the wicked an opportunity to stand unified before Him. The one day when even those whose deeds are steeped in darkness can transform themselves and return to the light. And now we arrive at the grand finale of this chapter, section 9. The Midrash brings one more interpretation of the expression "one day." Rabbi Shmuel Bar Ami teaches that from the beginning of the world's creation, God desired to form a partnership with the lower spheres. He wanted to dwell among His creation. And the Midrash asks, if the Torah were merely counting days, it should have used a uniform pattern. First day, second day, third day. Instead, the Torah says 1 day for the first day. Why? The answer is that God restored this designation to the day on which the tabernacle was erected. When Nissan, son of Aminadab, brought his offering on that day, the Torah calls it the first day. And God declared, "It is as though on that day I created my world." The Midrash then teaches that this day, the first of Nissan, received 10 crowns, 10 unique distinctions. It was the first day of creation itself, for it was a Sunday. It was the first day for the reckoning of kings, the first day for the offerings of the tribal princes, the first day of the priesthood, the first day that the divine presence dwelt among Israel, the first day of the priestly blessing, the first day of communal sacrificial service, the first day of the prohibition against offering sacrifices on private altars, the first day that slaughtering of the most holy offerings was required on the north side of the altar. And the 10th crown, it was the first day of the descent of the heavenly fire upon the altar, as the verse states. A fire went forth from before Hashem and consumed upon the altar the elevation, offering, and the fats. 10 crowns, 10 firsts, all converging on a single day. The Midrash is showing us that the light that emerged on the first day of creation did not just illuminate the physical world. It set in motion a chain of revelations that would only reach its fullest expression when God's presence came to dwell among His people in the tabernacle. And that, my friends, is chapter 3 of Bereishis Rabbah, from the origin of light as God's own garment, to the 5 flights of Torah, to the hidden primordial radiance reserved for the righteous, to the worlds created and destroyed before this one, to the cosmic vision of good and evil woven into the very fabric of the first day. This chapter gives us a complete theology of light. The message is clear. Light is not just something you see with your eyes. Light is Torah. Light is the presence of God. Light is the capacity to distinguish between good and evil. And light is the destiny of this world, the world that God finally looked at and said, "This one pleases me." Thank you for joining me. If this teaching resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who is hungry for the deeper layers of Torah. I will see you in the next video. Shalom.